Namaste everyone. My name's Ashna and today I'll be talking to May Webber from Mission Invertebrate for today's In Conversation With. Through our ICW platform, we aim to create conversation and dialogue about the climate crisis within our community. We do this by highlighting the work of climate activists and organisations here in the UK and showcasing their work in order to try and inspire others to join in the fight against climate change. Today's conversation is about the biodiversity in our London parks, and this ICW is part of our extended theme over the next few months, which is highlighting the importance of the elements within Hinduism. May, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand over the floor to you now to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how you got involved with Mission Invertebrate.
Thank you, and it's such a privilege to be here, so thank you for inviting me to speak. So my name is May. I work at the Royal Parks on a project called Mission Invertebrate, which is a People's Postcode Lottery funded project. We're in our 5th year now. I joined the team last year, but unfortunately had to start working from home with the pandemic. So this year now, 2021, I feel like Mission Invertebrate, we finally are back doing our engagement events. So Mission Invertebrate is a project all about exciting people about the role of invertebrates within our ecosystems, and particularly within our Royal Parks in London. So the Royal Parks cover over 5,000 acres of green space. So some people might be familiar with our more popular Royal Parks, such as kind of Regent's Park and Hyde Park in the centre of London. Also to our outer parks, Bushy and Richmond Park, that are well known for their kind of ancient oak trees and fantastic deadwood habitats, which I'll talk a little bit about later in terms of the importance of deadwood habitats for invertebrates. So I'm just going to share a slide with you now just to introduce Mission Invertebrate. So Mission Invertebrate is a project aiming to enrich wildlife in the Royal Parks, which are some of the largest and busiest green spaces in London. And despite being really busy, these green spaces still provide such an important habitat for invertebrates. And it is worth mentioning, invertebrates are everything without a backbone. So if you want to kind of feel, if you go to your back, you can feel your spine here. And so invertebrates lack that. So it's things like mollusks, insects, crustaceans, so you can have both kind of the sea creatures, so the aquatic invertebrates, as well as the invertebrates that we're familiar with on land. So there are 3 main strands to the project. So habitat enhancement, which is trying to improve our Royal Parks for invertebrates. So by creating new habitats or trying to improve meadows that we already have, for example. Then there's the engagement side as well. So that's school visits, exciting children about the role of invertebrates, and doing community engagement, which is where my role comes in as the partnerships and community engagement officer. And then there's also the kind of adult learning and citizen science that we get people involved in, and also we get experts in to do ecological surveys in the parks as well. And it's really important to carry out these surveys so that we get a picture of what the population of invertebrates are. If we've done a habitat enhancement project, can we then see an increase in some of those target species? And if so, that means that the habitat enhancement that we've done has worked. And a lot of what we do relies on volunteers who give up their time for free. So a big shout out and thanks to volunteers that help us with all of our work. So it's a big project. And as I mentioned, we work across all of our Royal Parks. And a lot of what we do is essentially kind of exciting people about the amazing and really crucial role that invertebrates play in our ecosystems.
Thank you. That's really exciting to hear about all the work that you're doing with Mission Invertebrate. How long has the project been running for?
So the project is in its 5th year now. And so this year our theme has been soils. So each year of the running we've had different themes, and this year is soil. I know we're going to touch on that shortly, but particularly with the impacts of kind of soil erosion and food security in terms of climate change. I think soil can be often forgotten about, but actually in terms of the importance that invertebrates play in our soil health, things such as worms that have a really important role as recyclers that create healthy soil for us to grow food, and all of the decomposers as well have such an important role in our soil health. And that's, again, another reason why we need to be aware that they're there and to protect them.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to ask, why is the biodiversity of all these invertebrates so important in our parks? And how does it relate to kind of protecting our planet and kind of maintaining the health of these parks?
Yeah, great question. So invertebrates are at the bottom of the food chain. So if you imagine a pyramid, we have the invertebrates kind of at the lower bottom of that. So if you imagine things like apex predators are at the top of the food chain. So things like mammals and birds, they eat the invertebrates. And if you remove the almost like a rug from beneath your feet, if you remove that, then everything above it is also affected. So these food chains are very intricate systems, and they're all in kind of a predator-prey balance. So if we remove the kind of, almost that bottom level, then unfortunately everything above it collapses. So that's why invertebrates are so important. And one of the largest groups within the invertebrates are insects, which I think most people are quite familiar with in terms of the role of some insects like hoverflies and bees and butterflies that pollinate, and moths as well, that do a really important role of pollinating. But of course, it's all the other invertebrates as well that are a food source for everything else that kind of that are in a higher food chain level, and their role as well in improving soil and providing healthy soils. So that's why for us, we really try and, harp home to people how important invertebrates are, because without them, we will see a larger collapse. And in terms of kind of a selfish point of view for our food security, not minding other animals that might go into decline, but for us as well, they play such an important role in that.
Yeah, it's very important to kind of raise awareness for this, because just a lot of people, including myself, just don't know much about it. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing to kind of just let people know about the importance of these invertebrates, really.
Definitely.
Yeah, so could you tell us more about the soil? And so you mentioned the worms and the role they play in the decomposing and soil health, but could you tell us a bit more detail about the importance of soil health and its effects on climate change?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we see, for example, in lots of green spaces, is when lots of people visit, which is fantastic. We want people to come and visit green space and engage with nature. Obviously, we know it improves our mental health and well-being. But an impact of that is that we have soil compaction. So where lots of people walk on the soil, it compacts, and then that can impact things like drainage, but also has an effect on the invertebrates that live there as well, because they can't move freely through the soil. And if you think about things like worms, I always talk about worms because most people are very, very familiar. So they move through the soil, and as they kind of digest it, essentially what they produce on the other end is kind of healthy filtered soil. And if they can't move freely, then that impacts them. Also with soils, things like we have solitary bees that create nesting chambers in soil as well. So it's not just always things that live right down below in the ground, but also just on the surface. And they also, they have, through creating the nesting chambers, they kind of create, again, their own kind of almost little ecosystem. And we also have ants as well that use soil. So ants create these kind of, sometimes, for example, if you go to Richmond Park, you can see these ant hills, and they're kind of big mounds on the grass. And often you're wondering what's creating those mounds, and actually it's an ant's nest, and they live below ground. And again, ants will they create kind of ventilation. They have a very sophisticated almost kind of tunnel system where they almost create their own kind of air conditioning, and again that moves air around the soil and allows for other invertebrates to move around. And so the invertebrates essentially keep the recycling of things like leaf litter and things above the soil that slowly decompose. So there are lots of things like fungus as well that help to decompose kind of leaves that fall, or dead organic matter, so dead wood or other dead plants. And all of those are broken down by invertebrates, and then all of their kind of the organic matter is then turned into healthy soil through the role of recycling invertebrates. And that's how we can then grow food. So that's why it's really important that we have healthy soil, so that we can grow kind of lots of nutritious food. And I'm sure you're probably aware of things like compost, which is essentially just really rich soil which we can grow food from. And so invertebrates have a really crucial role in creating, breaking down kind of green and organic matter into compost. And that's, you know, kind of a gardener's best friend is this compost that can then grow food. So so invertebrates play a really crucial role in creating healthy soils.
Thank you. I had no idea. It's almost like they have their kind of own little world underneath our feet that most of us have no idea about.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's really easy for it to go unnoticed, because they kind of are the unsung heroes that we can't see. So that's why we should, we should treat soil, as a really important habitat. Just because it's below our feet, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't have an impact on everything that's above it. And of course, soil plays a really crucial role in the carbon cycle as well.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask if there are any kind of particular creatures or any different types of nature that you'd like to mention. I imagine you kind of come across so many beautiful creatures, so please just share and like your favorite one.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it's hard to pick my favorite, but that's a great question. So my one true love are moths. And I think I love talking about moths because they're often a group of insects that people don't really like, especially because we have things like clothes moths, which people are familiar with, creating holes in our clothes because the caterpillars feed on kind of natural fibers like wool and cashmere and that kind of thing. But actually, there are over 2,500 species of moth just in the UK. So their variety is enormous. They have beautiful colour variations, and they also, as I mentioned, they have a really important role in the food chain. So they're a really crucial source of food for things like bats and birds, hedgehogs, and birds. So they are really important in that sense, but they're also pollinators. And I think lots of the time, people think of bees, solitary bees or bumblebees or honeybees as being the important pollinators, but actually moths play a really important role as well. And I think part of the reason that we're not in tune with our love for moths is because they often fly during the night time, so it's difficult for us to see them. But actually we have over 400 day flying moth species. So one of the moths to look out for, particularly if you're based in London, is the Jersey tiger moth, which is a day flying moth which is absolutely beautiful, kind of has bright orange colors with the reason why it's called a tiger is because the forewings are striped yellow and black and are really, really brightly colored. So I think that their beauty often goes unnoticed, but they are actually really stunning. So if anyone has the time to go onto the web and just have a look at the variety of moths that you can see, then I hope that people will fall in love with them. And I think what's also a really nice story about moths is that they, as I said, a lot of them fly during the nighttime, and you can use a piece of equipment called a moth trap to survey moths during the nighttime. And essentially it's a box with a bright light on top. And so with lots of insects, they fly towards the light, they're attracted to the light. And moths are one of the kind of really well-known insects that do that. So they're attracted to the light, they fly towards it and then get stuck in the box. And then in the morning, you can then come and have a look at the moths that you've collected, and you can record what species you've found, release them so they're not harmed or anything like that. And you can create a kind of data set. And if, for example, you do a moth trap, say once in the spring, once in the summer, once in the autumn, and you do that year on year, you might see an increase in moth species and moth varieties, or you might see a decrease. And actually, that's what lots of volunteers do, for example, and it paints a picture over a long-term trend. And actually, you know, with volunteers doing that, and with Mission Invertebrate, for example, running moth traps, we can see across the UK that moths are in decline, and that's really worrying, because moths are key indicator species of a healthy environment. So if you have lots of moth species, then that means that most likely it's a good indicator that the environment is healthy. And they are also key climate change indicators as well. So we have lots of migratory species that migrate over, like with many birds as well, like with the cuckoo or the swallow or the swift. They migrate over from North Africa and Europe. And actually, because our winters, for example, are becoming warmer, they are overwintering here. And lots of the species are going further north, so up into Scotland. We're seeing them increase their range because it's getting warmer. So that's also key evidence for a changing climate as well. So that's why I think moths are, you know, they're beautiful. They have a really important role in pollination and in the food chain, but also by studying them, we can see how our environment is changing.
It's really interesting that you chose moths, because I feel like that's kind of the one creature that people get really irritated by. I don't know if it's just me or in my household, but whenever we see a moth, we kind of just swat out the window, like we're never wanting it. But I never knew they had such an important role in kind of maintaining ecosystems like within our nature. That's really
Definitely.
interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I chose to talk about them, because I think they're often, you know, not that well known. So I think it's really nice to kind of draw attention to the fact that actually the moths that we normally encounter, so perhaps if you've got the bathroom light on and they fly in through the window, actually well, we do run those. So part of Mission Invertebrate, we do have we have a Mission Invertebrate roadshow that's due to start next week. That's kind of throughout our parks, and we do try and bring kind of live specimens, so run moth traps, and then we have you know, you can come and see the moths up close.
That's amazing. So you said about how volunteers often get involved with kind of setting these moth traps so that we can collect this data. Are there any other ways that volunteers who are interested in volunteering with Mission Invertebrate can get involved directly within like the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly with lockdown happening, lots of people have got kind of a newfound joy for their local green space, because they've been spending so much time in it, and it's been you know, a real a way of improving your mental health and well-being in such difficult times. So we've seen quite an increase in people wanting to volunteer, which is absolutely fantastic. And the parks, you know, the amount of time that volunteers dedicate in improving our parks and making them the great places that they are, we have the volunteers to thank for that, definitely. So lots of different activities. So within Mission Invertebrate, people can become citizen scientists. So they can just get in contact with Mission Invertebrate, and perhaps they can start doing surveys for us. So one of the groups of volunteers do butterfly surveys for us. So they walk what's called a transect, which is a route through our parks that's the same route that's done once a week, and a volunteer walks it and counts the butterflies that they see. And again, that gives us the long-term data to see, actually, yeah, we are seeing lots of butterflies. They're in abundance. You know, this is great. We must, you know, we must ensure that we continue to manage our parks to help these butterflies thrive. So it provides us with a really good picture of how the populations are faring. So there's ways of becoming kind of helping with surveying and monitoring. Then there's also the engagement, so helping with the Mission Invertebrate Roadshow, for example, or helping us with delivering our adult learning events, so talks and guided walks, that kind of thing. And then also the more kind of physical habitat enhancement works as well. So that could be things like tree planting or hedgerow planting, meadow raking, managing things, perhaps some of the plants that sometimes can overtake. So we have to pull some of those out so that they don't kind of overtake and overcompete with all of the other grass species, for example. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and people can head over to the Royal Parks website and search volunteering to find out all of those different opportunities. And as well, just to mention that no previous experience is required. So it doesn't matter if you're a total beginner, you learn, we train you and you learn, and it's a great opportunity to meet new people, and also kind of travel and lunch expenses to a certain extent as well are covered. So it's a really, really great way to kind of get outdoors and to help the invertebrates.
Definitely. I guess it's just, I'm the kind of person who jumps at any opportunity to be outside and be with nature. So it would be an ideal opportunity for that as well. And I feel like you'd learn so much because everyone would be so knowledgeable around you, and you just learn so much that you didn't know about parks. I think a lot of people, especially during COVID times, have gone to parks, but they haven't really taken the time to think about the nature within the park or the importance of the nature within the park. So it's really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think so there's obviously lots of things to learn about, so not just necessarily the invertebrates and the ecology, but also the geology, so the different the different soil types, and throughout history how the parks have changed. And it's really great to see so many people wanting to volunteer and to give up their time to help us.
Definitely. So if people weren't wanting to volunteer as such, but they're still wanting to know how to kind of protect the local habitats and protect our local parks, what can we do as members of the public to just make sure that we're kind of limiting our harm to the parks when we visit?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the campaigns that we have across our rural parks at the moment is to keep nature wild. So we're asking people not to feed the wildlife, but to instead find other ways of connecting with nature. So perhaps that's picking up photography, trying to photograph them, observing their behavior from a distance, painting or drawing the wildlife that you see. And we've created some great resources on our website that you can look at that has, we have kind of a spotters sheet. So you can go around the parks and see if you can spot all of the birds, for example, on the spotters sheet. And the reason we're asking people not to feed the wildlife is just so that we don't interfere with their natural behavior, and also with the huge volume of people feeding the animals. Obviously it comes from lots of the time, it comes from a great place wanting to help wildlife, but actually they can start competing for the food, and you kind of start seeing almost bullying behavior between the animals, and there's lots of food for them in the parks. So the best way to help is to observe them as a safe distance, and pick up things like photography or looking at what colors you can find. So kind of fun games, and those resources are available on our website. And then the other thing is just to kind of leave no trace as well. So things like if you are enjoying green space, just to make sure that you take all of your rubbish, put them in the bin, or take the rubbish home with you, so that there's no litter left behind in the parks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely all very important points. I wanted to just ask about how nature has been affected within the royal parks through COVID, and how you think the impact of COVID will kind of change after the restrictions are eased, as they're pretty much eased now, I suppose, because I feel like parks played a really important role when there was nowhere else to really go. So I just wanted to ask if you had noticed any changes within the nature there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think nature is very resilient. So we saw, an increase footfall in our parks last year. And although that did come with higher footfall, perhaps more areas of the parks were filled with people, so it can cause stress on animals. But in general, most the fact that more people are exploring their local green space, and for some people perhaps came to one of our parks for the first time, it's so great, because it means that they can connect with that space, and perhaps want to visit again. And it's really nice to know that the parks are a place for people that perhaps wanted to take some time out to improve their mental health and well-being. So it's really nice to know that, for example, that huge volume of volunteers that showed an interest in starting to volunteer with us just shows that people now perhaps have more of an appreciation for their green space. And that's certainly the case for me with my local parks where I live in South London. Lots of them I'd never visited before, but they were such an important place for me to do my daily exercise every day. And now I just want to really help those parks to thrive and to be great spaces for everyone. So I think that it's had a real impact on people who now see their green space as a really important place for them.
Definitely, yeah. So one final question from me. I just wanted to know if you've had a favourite project that you've worked on within Mission Invertebrate, or if there's any upcoming projects which you'd like to highlight that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, great question. So Mission Invertebrate we have a huge range of projects going on. So one of the projects that I'm involved in is a project called Sounds of the Undergrowth, which is all about the sounds of invertebrates, and this is particularly based at the Regent's Park. So we have a sound recordist who is recording some of the sounds. For example, putting a contact microphone into a compost bin, and you can hear the pitter-patter of woodlice and ants, their tiny footsteps, or for example the sound of grasshoppers on a hot day, making their vibrating and communicating in that way, that kind of buzzing sound that always reminds me of a kind of bright, hot summer's day. And so these sounds are going to be made into soundscapes and will give people an idea of what different habitats sound like, and the invertebrates that you can find there. So I think with invertebrates, lots of animals do make noises, but they're really, really difficult to hear. So that's why with this very sensitive equipment, we can pick up sounds that would otherwise go unheard. Also, soundscapes are a really great way, as I mentioned, with kind of recording and monitoring wildlife. Sounds are a really great way of seeing how a habitat has changed over time. So for example, if a habitat once was a great habitat, for example, a huge grassland meadow, and that you could hear all of these different animals, and it was a really loud noise of all of these grasshoppers and bees and hoverflies and dragonflies. If then perhaps over the next few years you continue to record in that same place, you might see the sounds diminishing, or perhaps birdsong becoming, not hearing birdsong as much. So that's again a really great indicator of how biodiversity is either increasing or decreasing. So the just purely the kind of the sound recording of a habitat can also be a really important tool in conservation, because you can see, oh well, when we recorded here a few years ago, we heard all of these different species, and now we can only hear, for example, this one species that's just managing to stay in the environment. So again, sound recording is a really useful tool for conservation. But yeah, so that's the sounds of the undergrowth project, which I'm really excited about. And then we're hoping to kind of post more about that on our social media. So you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and of course on our website too.
That's amazing. That sounds absolutely incredible. As a music student, I'm very
Yes.
excited by sounds, and I had no idea that it could kind of tell us so much about the kind of change between like nature over a period of time. So that sounds incredible.
Definitely. And it's also, sorry to interrupt, just to add on as well, there's sort of sound recordings that have shown that as well in coral reefs. So where we have bleaching events, again, you know, through the effects of warming seas and coral reefs being affected, the sounds of reefs that were once very healthy, all of this sound going on compared to after a bleaching event, for example, or after stress to that environment, you can hear that there's much less sound. And so that's a really, really crucial way, again, of seeing how the environment has changed, and actually the decline in species that you can see there.
That's incredible. Wow. That's amazing. Everything that you're doing with Mission Invertebrate sounds incredible, and I think I actually really want to get involved, so I'll probably be talking to you about that afterwards now. But thank you so much for coming to talk to us with our In Conversation With. As I mentioned before, this was about the elements within Hinduism, and this was particularly relating to the element of the earth. So obviously very relevant, and I've learned so much. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure, and as I said, a real privilege to be asked to talk. So thank you. I just wanted to, if I could, end on one of the slides, just to kind of leave people inspired by some of the range of biodiversity that we have within our parks. So I hope you can see that. But oh, hang on, sorry. So nature within the Royal Park. So you can see here a map of all of the Royal Parks, and just some of the images that you can see of some of the animals that you can find. So we have blackbirds and other songbirds, and then we have a common blue butterfly with that bright blue iridescence, and then a fox. So we have some of our parks, for example, in Regent's Park, have hedgehogs. So we're able to support mammal populations. And then you can see here as well, we have a coot and some dragonflies. So just to kind of leave people feeling inspired by how beautiful nature is. And although we're in, you know, many of the green spaces are right in the heart of London, we still have so much nature. So it's a really great thing to you know, visit the parks and really explore and see what wildlife you can spot.
Definitely. That sounds incredible. Thank you so much for all of that. Those pictures were absolutely stunning.
Yeah, so the photographer is called Tony Duckett, and he's one of our wildlife officers. So thank you to Tony for those beautiful images.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll make sure we put the kind of website for Mission Invertebrate underneath the video so that people can look into it more. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you again.